Chapter 1. The Silence in the Circuit ***. The forge groaned like a wounded titan, *** deep beneath the red skies of Marseille. The manufactorum vaulted upward in impossible arches, its pillars disappearing into smog thick enough to drink. Every surface glowed with heat conveyor fornaces, plasma stacks, molten rivers veined through the facility like lifeblood. The air trembled with the chanting of the tech priests, each hymn recited in steady binary cadence, a machine choir built to honor the only god they had ever known, ***. And in the center of that cathedral of iron stood Magos-elect Veneris Call, robes shimmering with heat distortion, cables twitching softly beneath his hood like serpents disturbed by light, ***. He began the rite of awakening, ***, greater than divine Omnissiah. Anoint the sparks within, awaken the spirit of this holy engine, ***. His vox grill translated the sacred prayers, layering metallic harmonics atop his cracking, biological voice. His mechadendrites came alive, extending toward the dormant machine core that floated before him, a fist-sized sphere of adamantium and crystalline memory lattice suspended in a magnetic cradle. This was no ordinary component. It belonged to a war engine destined for a Titan Auxilia cohort. ***, to awaken such a spirit was considered an honor, bordering on spiritual ecstasy. ***, Call's mechadendrites interfaced with the cradle's ports. Blessed oil dripped from each metallic tendril. Soft blue sparks hissed as circuit met circuit, mind touched mind, and the forge itself seemed to hold its breath. ***, around him, junior tech acolytes recorded every liturgical datum, while robed enginseers knelt, as if witnessing a relic being born. ***, Call initiated the connection. ***, a warm pulse of energy leaped from the cradle into his neural receptors. The expected greeting of a slumbering spirit. It should have strengthened into a whisper machine language, ancient and intimate, flowing directly into his cognition. ***, he braced for the communion. He opened his mind, and then nothing. Silence. Not the stillness of a dormant engine, ***, not the reluctance of an unresponsive spirit, ***, this was absence, total and absolute. ***, a void so profound it struck Call like a physical blow. His augmetics flickered. His biological eye widened, tearing from shock. One of his mechadendrites spasmed and slammed into the metal floor hard, enough to dent it. He staggered back. The machine core remained suspended in its cradle, its lights faint and cold, as if staring back at him with infinite indifference. Call's internal noospheric display burst with error runes, greater than nitrogen monoxide, connection failure, divine link, null. He had never seen those words in his centuries of service. Whispers rippled through the forge as acolytes sensed the anomaly. Their binharic liturgies fell into uncertain, stuttering fragments. Call reached again. He forced the connection, invoked subroutines older than the Imperium, prayers recorded before the age of strife. Still. There was nothing. The machine god did not answer. For a moment, Call believed his sensory augmetics had failed, but no, he felt their cold precision, their silent readiness. It was not he who had gone deaf, ***. It was the machine god who had turned away. ***, a cold dread flooded what remained of his flesh. Tech priests did not feel fear, not in the way unaugmented humans did. Their emotions were regulated, refined, reduced to manageable subroutines. But this was the fear of death, of abandonment, of spiritual nakedness before a god. He clutched the sides of the cradle, greater than respond. By the will of the Omnissiah, respond. His voice cracked. The metallic harmonizer faltered. He reached a third time, a fourth, a fifth. The silence deepened, becoming suffocating, oppressive. A cold void pushing against his skull from the inside. His mind recoiled. His neural implants shivered. One of his logic processors overheated and vented smoke. Asterisk across the forge. Engineers exchanged nervous glances. A tech priest failing to commune with a machine spirit was unthinkable. Tech priests were vessels of divine connection, intermediaries of the Omnissiah. Their entire purpose, their entire identity, was built upon the sacred bond between flesh, metal, and God. Call steadied himself. He switched to deeper protocols, private, forbidden, used only when communion with an engine might fail. These were protocols he had never once invoked in his lifetime. Asterisk he disconnected from the cradle, took a step back, and activated his internal right chamber. His vision dimmed into the familiar red-black of his neural sanctuary. Glyphs swirled around him in perfect geometric formations, coding prayers etched into his soul during his ascension. He whispered into the data stream, greater than machine God, I offer my mind, my circuits, my flesh. Asterisk, hear me. No answer. He pushed harder. Asterisk, greater than, I kneel before you. I have given you everything. Answer. Still nothing. The geometric glyphs distorted. Aracote bled into the edges like ink dissolving in water. His sanctuary destabilized. For the first time in his existence, Call lost control of his internal space. Asterisk, his mind snapped back into the physical world with a violent jolt. Asterisk, he collapsed to one. Kneea. Metallic clang echoed through the manufactorum as his metal joints scraped against the floor. The machine core drifted silently above him, unfazed, indifferent. Asterisk around him. Whispers grew louder. Asterisk, is he malfunctioning? Asterisk, did he break communion? Asterisk, impossible. The Magos elect has never. Asterisk, called rose slowly, using his staff of office for support. His vox grill crackled with static as he attempted to speak. The words that emerged felt brittle, fragile, wrong. Asterisk, greater than I. Cannot hear it. Asterisk, silence filled the chamber. Even the furnaces seemed to dim, as if recoiling from the confession. Asterisk, a acolyte dared to step closer, his mechanical limbs trembling. Asterisk, Mago select. Clarification required. You cannot hear. What? Called turned. His face, half machine and half wrinkled flesh, bore the expression of a man witnessing his soul unravel. Greater than the machine spirit, he whispered. It does not answer me. A wave of horror swept through the observers. For any other servant of the Imperium, such a statement would be the equivalent of a cleric saying the Emperor himself had turned his back. Asterisk call, expected disbelief, reprimand, even mockery. Asterisk instead. He saw something worse reflected in their lenses. Recognition, understanding, fear, as if this had happened before. Asterisk, as if they knew. Asterisk, the oldest of the engineers, stepped forward, his body almost entirely metal, his biological flesh reduced to a pale, preserved mask across a titanium skull. Asterisk, Magozilect, he murmured in binaric clicks. You must not speak such things aloud. Asterisk, Call felt anger flare in his organic chest, raw, unfiltered, humiliating. Asterisk, I have served the Omnissiah for 212 years, he hissed. I have never failed communion. The elder engineer's voice softened, but only by mechanical degrees. There are rare anomalies, glitches of faith, noospheric perhaps you require recalibration. No, Call said, more fiercely than he intended. It is not misalignment, it is rejection. The word hung in the air like a curse. One acolyte involuntarily recoiled, servo-joints whining in panic. Another crossed themselves with a cog-toothed pendant. Asterisk Call felt the heat of the forge intensify. Or perhaps it was his own systems overheating. His vision blurred. Asterisk he looked once more at the machine core, that cold, lifeless sphere that refused him. He extended a trembling mechadendrite. Asterisk the instant the metal touched the core's magnetic field. A surge of static exploded through his nervous system. His augmetics shut down for a fraction of a second, enough for his biological heart to skip a beat. He jerked his hand back. This wasn't communion. This was repulsion. The machine spirit was pushing him away. He felt the truth claw its way into his thoughts. The machine god had turned its gaze from him. He was unwelcome, unclean, unworthy. The Engensier's mechanical voice droned beside him. Now distant and thin. We must report this to the fabricator. Council. Call Bailey heard him. All he could hear was the silence. Silence, more terrifying than any scream demon could make. A silence that felt like the grave. A silence that whispered one message: you are no longer mine. But the silence was only the beginning, and the true wound had yet to be revealed. The breaching of the sacred quiet. The chapter opens with an intimate descent into the mind of a devoted tech adept, alone in the cold sanctum of a forged temple, where machine spirits hum like sleeping gods. He performs the rite of awakening with perfect precision, each canticle, each gesture, memorized from a lifetime of servitude. Yet something is wrong. The machine spirits around him no longer vibrate with recognition. Their once soothing whispers have become distant, strained, almost pained. At first, he believes it is a fault in his own sensoria, a corrupt, a damaged cogitator implant, a misaligned noospheric relay, but diagnostics show nothing. Every system within him functions perfectly, except the connection that matters most. The Omnissiah is silent. The machine god does not answer. The adept continues the rituals anyway. Desperation masked beneath mechanical discipline, he chants louder, slower, faster. His mechadendrites draw incense patterns through the air, tracing sacred sigils. He invokes every litany of binding he knows, but every invocation falls flat, as if spoken into a dead void. For the first time in his life, he feels something the Mechanicus doctrine never prepared him for: abandonment. This first chapter slowly builds the horror of what rejection feels like. His augmetic eye flickers. His internal cogitators skip cycles. Machine spirits begin to recoil from him, shutters slamming shut, ports locking in his presence. A servo skull that once obeyed him now emits a warning blurt and flees deeper into the forge's darkness. As the chapter progresses, the emotional tone shifts from confusion to denial, to the first tremors of fear. He recalls the legends, the Dark Ones never recited officially, of adepts whose code proved impure, whose spirits the machine god judged insufficient. Those men vanished. Their names were deleted, their data ghosts purged. He wonders if he now walks that same path. The chapter ends with a powerful, cinematic moment. He stands before a sacred reactor core, once his most faithful companion. He places his palm against the sigil-carved steel, awaiting the familiar warmth of recognition. The core turns cold. Its machine spirit recoils, and every lumen in the chamber dies at once. In the suffocating darkness, he is left alone with a silence so total, so absolute, that it feels like the judgment of a god. The forged temple should not have been this quiet, even when rituals had ended, even when the last servitors were powered down, even when the manufacturum shrines bowed into mechanical sleep. There was always a residual murmur, the soft after-echo of a billion machine spirits exhaling in unison. But tonight, nothing. My footsteps rang across the adamant flooring like intrusions, like violations. Even the echoes felt hesitant, as though the chamber wished to swallow them rather than reflect them. I adjusted the gain in my auditory implants. Silence. Not even the faint vibrato of the plasma conduits responded to my presence. The quiet pressed itself against me with unnatural weight, and for the first time since my ascension into the cult Mechanicus, I felt small, flesh small, mortal small. I approached the reactor dais with ritual caution. The great containment pillars rose around it like the ribs of a mechanical titan, carved with sigils and catechisms older than any living priest. I had tended this core for 2 centuries. I had whispered its litanies, soothed its surges, felt its power like a sunbeat beneath my palms. It had never once denied me. I drew a breath through my vox grill, a rasp shaped by metal rather than lungs, and recited the invocation of first contact. By your heat, I am cleansed. By your pulse, I am guided. By your will, I am sanctified. Normally. The machine spirit would respond here, a gentle hum, a shift in vibrational pattern, the familiar warmth blooming through the core's surface. Tonight, nothing changed. The reactor remained cold, still, unmoved, as though my words had not merely been unheard, but unwelcome. I extended my augmetic hand. Its chromium digits glinted under the dim lumen strips, hydraulics whispering with immaculate precision. I placed my palm against the reactor's inscribed casing, and the world froze. There was no temperature, no resonance. The core did not flare, did not recoil. It simply refused me, in the most absolute way a machine spirit could. A dead neutrality. I felt as though I had leaned into the chest of a corpse. My internal cogitators lurched. Error runes bloomed across my retinal display. Authorization, revoked. Connection, refused. Spirit link status. Null. Not unstable, not blocked, not pending purification. Just null. The kind of verdict reserved for those who had already been forgotten. My breath hitched. Flesh reacted where metal would not. A. Tremor rippled through the 53% of my body that remained organic, a weakness I had spent lifetimes disciplining into irrelevance. But now, the flesh surged upward, clawing its way to the surface of my awareness, offering the one sensation my augmetics could not suppress: fear. I withdrew my hand, slowly, as though fearing the core would lash out and strike me for the contact. But it did nothing. It did not recognize me enough even to reject me violently. It simply did not know I existed. I retreated a step, then another. The reactor chamber seemed to darken, the lumens flickering in the rafters, as if reconsidering whether they should illuminate me at all. My new spheric uplink, once flooded with overlapping machines, now returned only static, a cold, dispassionate crackling like distant bones fracturing. I opened a secure channel forge node Theta. Status request. Silence. I repeated it, increasing signal strength. Still. Silence. Increasing frequency bands. Injecting. Priority runes. Applying. Master key commands authorized to my rank. Nothing, not even an aerotone. The new sphere behaved as though I had not spoken at all. Impossible, I whispered. The word tasted wrong. Speech without vox modulation felt obscene. I overrode my emotional regulators, forcing my heart rate into measured cadence. Then I activated my internal diagnostic suite. The familiar string of checks scrolled before my augmetic eye. Cortex web. Optimal augmetic synapse links. Optimal new spheric relays. Optimal Omnissiah interface ports. Optimal all green. All pure. All functional. All meaningless. If the fault was not within me. Then the only remaining conclusion was one so blasphemous, my processors hesitated to articulate it. The Omnissiah himself had withdrawn. I felt the chamber breathe. Not physically, there was no wind, no pressure shift, no mechanical activity, but the atmosphere itself seemed to draw taut, as if the Forge Temple now regarded me with tense suspicion. Asterisk, far above. Metal chains clinked. Asterisk, a servo skull drifted from the shadows. Its optical lenses focused on me. Once, it had been my servant. Now, it issued a warning shriek, a burst of Benaric cant translated unmistakably as a command. Asterisk, unsanctioned presence. Vacate. Then it fled deeper into the rafters like a frightened animal. I stared up after it, stunned. Servo skulls did not fear. They did not flee. They obeyed, unless something within them recognized a threat, or a contamination, a desecration, a heresy. Me. The silence grew teeth. Asterisk, and as it pressed harder against my audio implants, I began to hear whispers, but not machine whispers. Asterisk, no. Asterisk. These were the sounds of my own pulse, my own ragged breath, the tremor of flesh I had long forgotten how to feel. Asterisk, the Forge Temple was reminding me of what I truly was beneath my sanctified plating. Human, weak, unworthy, impermanent. Asterisk, my mechadendrites curled inward, as if recoiling from my spine. Their internal spirits, the tiny, semi-sentient ghost patterns that regulated their behavior, shrank away from my neural impulses. Asterisk, they did not trust me either. The abyss widened inside my chest. Asterisk, Omnissiah. Why? I had never questioned the machine god before. Not once. Asterisk, not even in private thoughts, where secrecy was absolute. Asterisk, but standing there, surrounded by sleeping engines that no longer recognized me, I felt something break loose inside my mind, a crack across a perfectly balanced cog. I sank to one knee, not as ritual, as collapse. My vision blurred, not from optical failure, but from a surge of human emotion I had long suppressed. Asterisk, abandonment. Felt nothing like I had been taught. Asterisk, it was not a stern lesson. It was not purification by absence. It was a wound, deep, total, silent. Asterisk, I rose only when my legs stopped responding entirely. Asterisk, I did not remember standing. Asterisk, my auto-stabilizers must have taken over. Asterisk, I turned toward the chamber exit, intending to retreat to my quarters, run deeper diagnostics, recalibrate my entire system, purge any trace impurities in both spirit and steel. Asterisk. But the door did not open. It scanned my identification sigil. It rejected it. Access denied. Priest log, AFFIX. Invalid. Invalid. My rank title. My lifelong identity. My sacred designation encoded into the data vaults of this forge world. Invalid. I placed my palm against the rune panel. Asterisk. It dimmed beneath my touch, as though attempting to avoid contact. Asterisk. And then, the lights went out. One by one, row by row. Asterisk, from the edges of the chamber inward, a perfect circle of darkness tightened around me, sealing me into a shrinking ring of light. Asterisk, machine spirits extinguished their own lumens rather than share illumination with me. The last light died, and the darkness became absolute. I did not cry out, not because of discipline, not because of pride, asterisk, but because something inside me understood what this moment truly was, a judgment, the quiet verdict of a deity made of logic, steel, and eternity. I was alone, truly alone, asterisk, and for the first time in my existence, I understood how terrifying silence could be, asterisk, but this was only the beginning. I had yet to learn the history that made rejection of fate worse than death. Darkness changed the asterisk in the absence of light. The familiar architecture dissolved into a cathedral of unknowable shapes. The sacred silhouettes of industrial machinery warped into towering shadows, each one rising like a robed figure frozen mid-ritual. Asterisk, even my augmented sight struggled. Lenses clicked open along my bionic eye, wide-angle infrared, lumen intensified, each cycling through their spectrums. Nothing. All I found was an oppressive void that swallowed every frequency I reached for. Asterisk. My sensor arrays returned the same conclusion again and again. Asterisk. No data detected. No pattern detected. No spirit activity detected. Asterisk. As if the chamber itself had ceased to exist, or worse, as if I had ceased to exist within it. My internal power systems hummed louder than the forge around me. Asterisk. The sound of my own machinery echoed off emptiness. Hydraulic pistons flexed beneath my ribs. Coolant lines pulsed like artificial arteries. These were supposed to be harmonious sounds, the proof of my ascension, the choir of my unity with the machine. Asterisk. But in the darkness, they felt grotesque, loud, selfish, intrusive, on Mars. A tech priest was taught that the holy union of flesh and metal created harmony. The flesh diminished, the steel ascended, and the two became more than the sum of their parts. Asterisk. Now, isolated from the machine that once completed me, I realized something terrible. Asterisk. Without them, my augmetics were not holy. They were noise. Exposed. Unguided. Vibrating out of sync with the universe. I steadied myself with a mantra. Asterisk. Greater than metal is eternal. Flesh is transient. Asterisk. Metal is truth. Flesh is error. Asterisk. Metal remembers. Flesh forgets. Asterisk. But even these sacred words trembled in my vox grill, as though they no longer belonged to me. The dark felt hostile to them, hostile to sacred logic itself. Asterisk. My memory circuits replayed the last time I had felt anything similar. Asterisk. The schism furnaces of Lemuria. Asterisk. The battlefield, where machine spirits screamed through the noosphere as chaos corrupted them. Asterisk. Their voices had twisted into agonized profanity, warping into patterns no logic engine could parse. But even then, even at their most corrupted, they had spoken. Tonight, the silence was worse. This was not corruption, not malfunction, not interference. This was absence. I adjusted my stance. Carefully. Mechanically. Asterisk. Standing perfectly still, felt safer. As though any movement might provoke the unseen entity that now owned this darkness. And yet remaining motionless brought its own terror. The fear that the chamber would forget me entirely if I did not remind it through action. I tried again to open a noospheric ping. A simple one. A beginner's invocation. The kind a novice Magos initiate could perform in their first month. Asterisk. No response. Asterisk. My connection floated outward, like a prayer launched into an empty sky. No echo returned. My emotional regulators attempted to compensate for rising stress. Increase serotonin modulation. Asterisk. Suppress adrenal spike. Asterisk. Override human effect. I denied the override, not out of bravery. Asterisk. But because, for the first time, asterisk. Fear was the only thing that felt real. A single lumen flickered to life, high above, far from reach. Asterisk. It sputtered erratically, casting broken fragments of yellow light into the dark. Each pulse revealed a glimpse of something, a railing, a conduit, a cogitator screen, before plunging it back into shadow. The flicker wasn't random, it was rhythmic, steady, almost like a heartbeat. Asterisk. My optical sensors locked onto it. The lumen's pulse pattern aligned with a frequency only members of the cult Mechanicus would recognize. Asterisk. It was a binary distress signal, a warning pattern, an ancient one. Asterisk. One, older than the Imperium itself. Asterisk. A signal used during the dark age of technology, only 6 pulses long, translated into Low Gothic. The meaning was simple: do not approach. Greater than asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. That was when I realized it wasn't meant for anyone else. Asterisk. It was meant for the machines. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They were warning each other about me. I took one hesitant step backward. Asterisk. Immediately, something answered. Not a voice, Not a spirit, not even a sound, but a shift. A pressure across my Auspex field. A ripple in the electrostatic signature of the room. Asterisk. It brushed across my augmetic limbs first. A cold analytical sensation, like a scanning beam. Then it pressed against my chest, seeping into the pockets of remaining flesh beneath the plating dot. Asterisk. And deeper still, into my thoughts. As though whatever watched me did not need eyes to observe, only silence. I forced a system-wide purge. Asterisk. My augmetics hissed as emergency coolant flushed through them. My mind lit with warning, SIGILS. Asterisk. This was forbidden, dangerous, potentially damaging. Asterisk. But it snapped me out of paralysis long enough to move. Asterisk. I pushed toward the exit again, step by step. Servo muscles whining. Asterisk. Mechadendrites, tense and coiled like frightened serpents. Asterisk. My hand reached the door once more. Its rune panel did not light. My presence was not recognized. Asterisk. No, forgotten. Asterisk. I analyzed the door mechanisms. They were functional. Powered. Asterisk. Connected to the forge grid. They simply refused to acknowledge me. Like the reactor, like the servoskull, like the noosphere. The entire forge world was shrinking away from me. Asterisk. The silence deepened into something almost intelligent. Asterisk. My mind caught fragments of memory. Unbidden. Asterisk. The first time I connected to a machine spirit as an initiate. The warmth. The presence. Asterisk. The gentle union of mind and metal. That sensation had defined my entire existence. Now, the inverse surrounded me. A void. A cold, suffocating absence that felt hungry, not for consumption, but for denial. The machine god had not sent this silence to punish me. Asterisk. He had sent it to erase me. Asterisk. I staggered from the realization. Asterisk. My stabilizers fired, catching me before I fell. The darkness watched, patient, unhurried, certain. Then, from deep within the black, something moved, a faint scraping metal against metal, slow, deliberate. My auditory implants amplified the sound until it filled my skull. Asterisk. Another scrape. Closer, then a soft metallic thud. Servitors did not move without orders. Skulls did not wander in darkness. Drones did not patrol dead chambers. But something was moving. Something unlit, unregistered. Asterisk. Unblessed by the OMNISSIAH. Asterisk. My vocal processors stuttered, caught between chanting and screaming. The thing moved closer. Scrape, scrape, scrape. My vision strained to find it. Then, a gleam, a flash of reflected lumen light, sliding across a curved piece of metal, an exposed augmetic joint. Asterisk. A limb, a torso, a figure, moving wrong, jerking, as if half its systems fought each other. A tech priest. Asterisk. No. A corpse. A half-dead machine body, limping with unnatural stiffness, dragging broken mechadendrites behind it like severed nerves. Asterisk. One of the priests who had taken part in the ritual tonight. The one who stood beside me during the rite of awakening. The one who had seemed perfectly functional moments before the silence fell. Asterisk. Now he was twitching like a puppet whose strings had been cut and tied back poorly. Asterisk. He reached out a trembling hand toward me. Not in request. Not in warning, but in recognition. He could see me. Asterisk. Even if nothing else could. His vox grill hissed. Then a single broken whisper escaped. Asterisk. Greater than. Run. Greater than. Yet, even then, I did not understand the true scale of what had been set in motion. And then, the lights went out. One by one. Row by row. Asterisk. From the edges of the chamber inward. A perfect circle of darkness tightened around me, sealing me into a shrinking ring of light. Asterisk. Machine spirits extinguished their own lumens, rather than share illumination with me. Asterisk. The last light died, and the darkness became absolute. Asterisk. I did not cry out, not because of discipline, not because of pride. Asterisk. But because something inside me understood. what this moment truly was. A judgment. The quiet verdict of a deity made of logic, steel, and eternity. I was alone. Truly alone. And for the first time in my existence, I understood how terrifying silence could be. But this was only the beginning. I had yet to learn the history that made rejection of fate worse than death. Darkness changed, the forge temple. In the absence of light, the familiar architecture dissolved into a cathedral of unknowable shapes. The sacred silhouettes of industrial machinery warped into towering shadows, each one rising like a robed figure frozen mid-ritual. Even my augmented sight struggled. Lenses clicked open along my bionic eye. Infrared lumen intensified, each cycling through their spectrums. Nothing. All I found was an oppressive void that swallowed every frequency I reached for. My sensor arrays returned the same conclusion again and again. No data detected. No pattern detected, no spirit activity detected. As if the chamber itself had ceased to exist. Or worse. As if I had ceased to exist within it. My internal power systems hummed louder than the forge around me. The sound of my own machinery echoed off emptiness. Hydraulic pistons flexed beneath my ribs. Coolant lines pulsed like artificial arteries. These were supposed to be harmonious sounds, the proof of my ascension, the choir of my unity with the machine. But in the darkness, they felt grotesque, loud, selfish, intrusive. On Mars, a tech priest was taught that the holy union of flesh and metal created harmony. The flesh diminished, the steel ascended, and the two became more than the sum of their parts. Now, isolated from the machine spirits that once completed me, I realized something terrible. Without them, my augmetics were not holy. They were noise, exposed, unguided, vibrating out of sync with the universe. I steadied myself with a mantra. Greater than metal is eternal. Flesh is transient. Metal is truth. Flesh is error. Metal remembers. Flesh forgets. But even these sacred words trembled in my vox grill, as though they no longer belonged to me. The dark felt hostile to them, hostile to sacred logic itself. My memory circuits replayed. The last time I had felt anything similar. The schism furnaces of Lemuria. The battlefield where? Machine spirits screamed through the noosphere as chaos corrupted them. There. Voices had twisted into agonized profanity, warping into patterns no logic engine could parse. But even then, even at their most corrupted, they had spoken. Tonight, the silence was worse. This was not corruption, not malfunction, not interference. This was absence. I adjusted my stance, carefully, mechanically. Standing perfectly still, felt safer, as though any movement might provoke the unseen entity that now owned this darkness. And yet, remaining motionless brought its own terror, the fear that the chamber would forget me entirely if I did not. Reminded through action. I tried again, to open a new spheric ping, a simple one, a beginner's invocation, the kind a novice Magos initiate could perform in their first month. No response. My connection floated outward like a prayer launched into an empty sky. No echo returned. My emotional regulators attempted to compensate for rising stress. Increase serotonin modulation. Suppress adrenal spike. Override human effect. I denied the override. Not out of bravery, but because, for the first time, fear was the only thing that felt real. A single lumen flickered to life. High above, far from reach. It sputtered erratically, casting broken fragments of yellow light into the dark. Each pulse revealed a glimpse of something, a railing, a conduit, a cogitator's screen, before plunging it back into shadow. The flicker wasn't random. It was rhythmic, steady, almost like a heartbeat. My optical sensors locked onto it. The lumen's pulse pattern aligned with a frequency only members of the cult Mechanicus would recognize. Asterisk, it was a binary distress signal, a warning pattern, an ancient one older than the Imperium itself. A signal used during the dark age of technology. Asterisk, only 6 pulses long. Asterisk, translated into Low Gothic. The meaning was simple: do not approach. Greater than asterisk, asterisk. That was when I realized it wasn't meant for anyone else. Asterisk, it was meant for the machines. Asterisk, asterisk, asterisk. They were warning each other. Asterisk about me. I took one hesitant step backward. Immediately, something answered. Asterisk, not a voice, not a spirit, not even a sound. Asterisk, but a shift, a pressure across my auspex field, a ripple in the electrostatic signature of the room. Asterisk, it brushed across my augmetic limbs first, a cold, analytical sensation, like a scanning beam. Then it pressed against my chest, seeping into the pockets of remaining flesh beneath the plating. Asterisk, and deeper still, into my thoughts. As though whatever watched me did not need eyes to observe, only silence. I forced a system-wide purge. Asterisk, my augmetics hissed as emergency coolant flushed through them. My mind lit with warning seizure. Asterisk, this was forbidden, dangerous, potentially damaging. Asterisk, but it snapped me out of paralysis long enough to move. Asterisk, I pushed toward the exit. Again, step by step. Servo muscles, whining. Asterisk, MECHADENDRITES, tense and coiled like frightened serpents. My hand reached the door once more. Its rune panel did not light. My presence was not recognized. No. Forgotten. I analyzed the door mechanisms. They were functional, powered, connected to the forge grid. They simply refused to acknowledge me, like the reactor, like the servo skull, like the NOOSPHERE. Asterisk. The entire forge world was shrinking away from me. The silence deepened into something almost intelligent. Asterisk, my mind caught fragments of memory. Unbidden. Asterisk, the first time I connected to a machine spirit as an initiate. The warmth, the presence. Asterisk, the gentle union of mind and metal. Asterisk, that sensation had defined my entire existence. Now the inverse surrounded me. A void. Asterisk, a cold, suffocating absence that felt hungry not for consumption, but for denial. The machine god had not sent this silence to punish me. Asterisk. He had sent it to erase me. I staggered from the realization. My stabilizers fired, catching me before I fell. The darkness watched, patient, unhurried, certain. Then, from deep within the black, something moved. Asterisk, a faint scraping metal against metal. Slow, deliberate. Asterisk, my auditory implants amplified the sound until it filled my skull. Another scrape, closer. Asterisk, then a soft metallic thud. Asterisk, servitors did not move without orders. Skulls did not wander in darkness. Drones did not patrol dead chambers. But something was moving. Something unlit, unregistered, unblocked. By the OMNISSIAH. Asterisk, my vocal processors stuttered, caught between chanting and screaming. The thing moved closer. Scrape, scrape, asterisk. My vision strained to find it. Asterisk, then a gleam, asterisk, a flash of reflected lumen light sliding across a curved piece of metal. Asterisk, an exposed augmetic joint, a limb, a torso, a figure, moving, wrong jerking, as if half its systems fought each other. Asterisk, a tech priest. No, a corpse. Asterisk. When the lights returned, nothing was as it had been. The forge temple hummed with a dull, unwilling resonance. Sparks rained from frayed conduits. Runes glowed faintly, corrupted, flickering between red and sickly green, as if even the sacred script feared to speak in full. Servo arms twitched erratically, brushing against the walls as though they too sought distance. And Loran. He was changed. Not visibly, not yet. But something had shifted inside him. Something older than Augmetics, older than flesh, older than the Omnissiah's own wisdom. He drew a breath, wet, human, but it carried weight beyond normal physiology. Even in the presence of his own fluid-filled servitor tank, the air vibrated with a resonance that belonged neither to Mars nor to the forge. Something had awakened. The acolytes and apprentices stared at him, eyes wide, lenses flicking between scan overlays and each other. Whispered prayers spilled from cracked lips. Magozin Ginser Vero's faceplate creaked as he turned slowly. His voice was a hiss through the vox grill. "What have you become?" But the words were empty. They knew the answer already. He had crossed a threshold they did not understand. Not in centuries, perhaps not in millennia. Even the mechadendrites clinging to his spine twitched as if sensing the shift. The tiny machine spirits embedded within them, guardians of process and ritual, recoiled from his mind. They were afraid. A priest's fear is rare, but in Loran, even the most disciplined servitor-augmented mind could not reconcile what had begun. He felt the silence again. It was different this time. Not emptiness, not absence, not denial. It was anticipation. The machine god had not simply rejected him, he had abandoned him. But the universe of the Mechanicus, of Mars, of the forge, was listening, waiting. Something ancient had taken note. Something that remembered the very first union of flesh and machine. The first whisper of sparks that became the Omnissiah, and it was curious. Memories surfaced unbidden, not his own, but pieces of something collective. The first apprentice he had guided, trembling under the weight of ceremonial servitor plating, a manufactorum strike centuries ago, when his own hand had crushed a faulty cogitator to prevent a catastrophic overload. The prayers of the dead, whispered into void conduits, a child screaming as metal tendrils replaced her arms in an improper rite. They all converged inside him. He felt their pain, their joy, their terror, their lives, compressed into data streams racing through his neural mesh, and with them, the command colon remembered. He realized what had been done. The machine god had not simply rejected him, it had tested him, but the test was not of obedience, not of faith, it was of memory. The machine god did not care if the flesh remained loyal, it cared if the soul remembered, and Loran. He remembered too much. Every mechanized hymn he had ever sung, every ritual whispered under the weight of molten steel, every spark of communion, every failure was too much, and yet not enough. The chamber shivered with psychic resonance. The machinery seemed to bend around him. Servo arms arched like the spines of praying skeletons. Cogitators hummed with corrupted syncopation. Even the once trusted noospheric uplinks shivered, as if in dread of what they were about to record. A crack appeared in the observation window of his tank, small, hairline, but it grew rapidly, spiderwebbing across the reinforced composite, and from that fracture, a light shone, not cold white, not red, not gold. A strange, blue-white glow, like the echo of a soul, compressed into wire and flesh. It reached for him, and he reached back, not with his hand, not with Mechadendrites, but with memory. He sent pulses of recognition, ancient patterns of data, long-forgotten and whispers he did not know, he still knew. They licked at the fracture in the tank, pressed against the glowing shimmer, and were received. A resonance blossomed, a faint vibration that ran up his spine, through his augmetics, through his neural mesh. into the core of his being. Something answered, not in words, not in sound, but in presence. A faint awareness of acknowledgement. The machine god had noticed. But acknowledgement was not mercy. It was observation. A test. A declaration. Loran felt it like a physical blow. A weight pressing into his chest. You are known. You exist. But you are not mine. The thought radiated through his mind. The flesh tingled. The metal. vibrated. And the chamber itself seemed to recoil. He was both. Part of the machine and apart from it. Neither. Fully alive, nor fully servitor. Neither human nor holy. He was forgotten. Not in the sense of neglect. Not in the sense of oversight, but in the cosmic, absolute sense that the universe had no record of him beyond this moment. He was an anomaly. A ghost in the mechanics. He fell to his knees. Metal limbs, clanking against the floor. Hydraulic hiss, mingling with the faint whisper of warp-touched memory. And he did the only thing a priest could do. He prayed. Not to the Omnissiah, not to the machine god, not to the universe. He prayed to himself. To the memory of what he had been. To the fragments of flesh and steel that still clung to him. If I am alone, let me remember. If I am forgotten, let me hold what is left. If I am abandoned, let me survive. The words were weak, but they were his, and in that small defiance, the chamber stirred. The mechadendrites twitched again, retracted slightly. The flickering runes brightened, not mercy, not favor, but recognition. He existed, even if the machine god refused him. But even this fragile victory was only the first step, for beyond memory and flesh lay the catechisms of iron, the truths of faith, the history of devotion, and the scales upon which rejection would weigh heavier than death itself. Chapter 2. The Catechisms of Iron and the History of Faith. The forge world of Mars stretched beyond sight, a labyrinth of steel, fire, and devotion. Endless layers of manufactoria rose like mountains, their peaks disappearing into smog-choked skies, while below, rivers of molten metal flowed like veins of a sleeping giant. The air itself was thick with the scent of oil, ozone, and incense, and every clang of hammer on anvil resonated like a hymn. Here, every machine, every bolt, every cog was sacred, a testament to the Omnissiah's dominion over matter. And yet, to truly serve the machine god, one had to surrender more than flesh. One had to surrender memory, will, and even identity. Loran, though abandoned by the machine god, now wandered these halls in mind, if not in body. His senses, sharpened by augmetics, absorbed every ritual motion, every chant of servo-priests and apprentices, yet he felt a growing distance. He was a shadow in a world that moved with divine rhythm, a ghost touching the surface of a faith he once embodied. The catechisms that had guided generations of tech priests, the rites of awakening, the litanies of service, the oaths of augmentation were alive around him, but he could no longer claim them. The teachings of the cult Mechanicus were etched in iron and fire, yet he alone could not touch their truth. The machine god, the Omni, and the faith of Mars *, every tech priest knew the central truth. The Omnissiah was not merely a deity, but the principle of all mechanical perfection. He did not reward weakness. He did not forgive hesitation. To be accepted by him required absolute discipline, perfect alignment of flesh and steel, and the faithful surrender of doubt. From the earliest rites, initiates were taught that augmetics were not enhancements, they were offerings. Each implanted servomotor, each bionic eye, each cortical interface was a prayer in metal. To deny them, to fail in maintenance or ritual, was sacrilege. To the Mechanicus, the line between failure and heresy was not a line at all, it was an abyss. And yet, the history of Mars was a tapestry woven with those who had dared step too far. those who had been tested and found wanting, and those who had been exiled for their imperfections. Mars itself bore witness to this devotion. Cities of cogitators and forges had risen and fallen over millennia, each one a monument to the unyielding faith of men who became machines. The schism of Mars, when the tech priests rebelled against one another over doctrine, had been fought not with bladed weapons alone, but with logic, ritual, and devotion to principle. Entire legions of servo-priests had perished, not in combat, but in the silent judgment of their own inefficiency. It was here, among these iron tombs of faith, that Loran's failure would be remembered or forgotten. The catechisms of iron. The catechisms were more than scripture. They were law, philosophy, and covenant. Each phrase, each diagram, each sequence of rituals was a map of morality, service, and cosmic alignment. Loran remembered the first time he had traced his fingers along the etched steel of the Codex Mechanicus, feeling the raised letters hum under his touch. He had been young, proud, certain of his place in the universe. The flesh is transient, the machine is eternal. The will must be singular, the mind unbroken. Only in the union of cognition and metal is salvation achieved. These words had shaped every thought, every heartbeat, every step he had taken in holy service. To falter meant more than personal failure, it meant an affront to the eternal rhythm of the Omnissiah, a rupture that could ripple through the new sphere, destabilizing the delicate communion between human and machine. And yet, as he walked through the immense halls, Loran felt the bitter truth. All the catechisms, all the litanies, all the sacred protocols could not shield him from the silence. The machine god had judged, and he had failed. Rites, oaths, and augmentations. The journey of a tech priest was measured in layers of augmentation. Limbs replaced with steel, eyes with lenses that could pierce the spectrum of reality, brains integrated with cogitators that could calculate in milliseconds what 100 men could not in hours. Each rite of augmentation was a liturgy, each mechanical enhancement a sacrament. But in Loran, the flesh had begun to reclaim itself. The augmentations no longer synchronized. Servos spasmed. Neural conduits shivered, and every failed interface was a whisper of shame. You are unworthy. He remembered the initiation rites, the purifications, the litanies of steel that he had chanted as a novice. The litany of the one spark had been his first communion with the machine spirit, a ritual that demanded total surrender. He had performed it flawlessly, and yet, here he was, rejected. History itself seemed to mock him. Stories of other priests who had been found wanting, cast aside, their names erased from the registers of the faithful, became living warnings. To be abandoned by the machine god was to become a heretic, an all but titula, pariah, in a universe that demanded perfection, the weight of rejection. Loran's mind drifted through the annals of Mechanicus history, as if seeking solace in precedent. He recalled the chronicles of Magos Ithrael, whose flesh had resisted augmentation and who had been exiled to the outer manufactoria, a living monument of failure. He remembered the fate of the cogitator adepts who had lost synchronization during the Great Forge alignment, their minds permanently fused with rogue data spirits, screaming eternally in the void. And yet, there was no comfort. Rejection by the machine god was not a story, not a lesson, not a myth. It was an abyss. It was silence where there should have been voice, absence where there should have been communion, the denial of purpose where there should have been devotion. Loran had always understood the theoretical. He had read the histories, memorized the catechisms, witnessed the punishments, but to experience it was to descend into a new kind of terror, a terror that could not be mitigated by rituals or scripture. The philosophy of worthiness, the cult, taught that worthiness was measurable. Every action, every ritual, every heartbeat in service to the Omnissiah, could be quantified and evaluated. Faith was not faith. It was function. Devotion was not emotion. It was efficiency. Holiness was not piety. It was compliance. And yet, Loran's failure illuminated a profound paradox. The machine god's judgment was absolute, yet inscrutable. Worthiness could not always be demonstrated through service. Obedience did not guarantee acceptance, and perfection did not ensure survival. It was a cruel calculus, a divine algorithm that demanded infinite knowledge and eternal fidelity impossible, even for the most devout. And when one fell short, the consequences were total. Reflection and transition walking through the cavernous halls of Mars. Loran felt both infinitesimal and infinite. He was a single data point in the unfathomable expanse of the Omnissiah's design. The catechisms, the histories, the rites, they all existed, yet none could reach him now. He was abandoned not for sin, nor for failure, but because the scale of judgment itself was indifferent to the individual. And as he passed rows of dormant their metallic eyes reflecting the pale light of forge lamps, he understood the cost. Knowledge without communion, memory without acceptance, flesh without machine. These were the components of a life a soul unanchored. The silence of the machine god was complete, and yet, it was only the beginning. For the next trial awaited not in the history of faith, nor in the sanctity of rites, but in the betrayal of his own body, the body that refused to be fully machine, the flesh that would not surrender, the augmetics that could no longer conceal the truth. He was failing from within. Chapter 3. The body that betrays the chamber was silent, but it was not peace, only absence. Loran's eyes, augmented yet failing, traced the lines of servitors and consuls. But every reflection of light carried a lie. The flesh beneath his metal skin itched, pulsed, and remembered itself in ways he had long denied. It was waking, and with each heartbeat, it screamed its rebellion. The augmetics were the first to falter. Servos hesitated, ocular implants flickered, neural conduits burned with static. The litany of integration he had recited for decades, a prayer for harmony between mind and machine, became a cacophony of alarms and error codes. Even the fluid in his servitor tank, warm and sacred, shivered as though aware that its charge was unraveling. Pain followed immediately, not sharp, not sudden, slow, creeping, an insidious gnawing at the interface between metal and flesh. Muscles he had believed removed began to twitch. Nerves thought, severed, pulsed once more, and somewhere deep within the labyrinth of his psyche, memories of vulnerability surged forth. The cold of a child's death, the warmth of a mother's hand, the sting of inadequacy he had tried to erase. This was the first betrayal. Diagnostics and purifications. Magozengensier Vero hovered above him, lenses scanning, mechadendrites working furiously to reassert control. Runes flashed along panels as diagnostic protocols engaged, each one a desperate prayer that his soul could still be synchronized. But every scan returned failure. The flesh had not only returned, it had begun to dominate. Implants glitched, biocircuits fried, neural feedback loops sparked dangerously close to permanent damage. The priests chanted purification rites, spraying acids and sanctified fluids over exposed interfaces, hoping to burn the resurgence of organic rebellion from his body. Electrolances traced patterns over augmented bone, leaving sizzling trails on synthetic skin all around. The smell of burnt wiring and charred flesh mixed with the familiar odor of incense and lubricants. Loran convulsed, not from pain alone, though the agony was immense, but from the horror of realization. The machine did not fully obey. The rituals did not fully cleanse. The flesh remembered. It remembered him. And in remembering, it defied the machine god. The fragility of identity, it was more than physical, more than augmetic failure. His identity itself began to fragment. Loran felt thoughts emerging that were not his own, feelings he had long denied, instincts of survival and fear that he had suppressed under decades of ritual discipline. The boundary between human and machine blurred, leaving him neither whole nor holy, but something grotesquely in between. Every movement became a negotiation, each thought a battle. The neural mesh pulsed with contradictory impulses, one part screaming obedience, another screaming self-preservation, and yet another whispering in an unknown tongue, an ancient rhythm that predated Mars itself. He was fracturing, and each fracture carried with it a shard of terror. And the machine god. Its silence rang louder than any voice. No guidance, no reprimand. Only judgment rendered in absence, in withdrawal, in denial. The augmentation's rebel, his mechadendrites twitched spasmodically. Servolimbs jerked with misaligned motions. Ocular lenses distorted, overlaying his vision with flickering images of memories he did not recognize. A battlefield buried in metal. The screams of dead machines, the molten eyes of servitors watching him fall. Neural feedback circuits, designed to stabilize thought, sparked in rhythm with his heartbeat, embedding panic into his mind. It was as if the augmetics themselves had turned traitor, their faithless obedience corrupted, not by the warp, but by the flesh it sought to suppress. Loran's hands, both biological and mechanical, flexed of their own accord, striking at the empty chamber, shattering monitors, spraying hydraulic fluid across the floor. And still, the body did not relent. The horror of self, it was the horror of the self that cut deepest. For decades, he had believed that perfection was mechanical obedience, that humanity was a flaw to be erased, that devotion was defined by the absence of thought, the absence of doubt, the absence of flesh. Now, flesh had returned. Memory had returned. Fear had returned. Humanity, long exiled from his mind and body, rose like a tide to drown him. He was a priest, betrayed by his own being, a machine rejected by its own machinery, a soul left to fend for itself in the vacuum of divine indifference. Pain and terror intertwined. Every heartbeat was a drum of accusation, every nerve a witness to failure. Loran screamed, but no one could hear the depth of his agony. For the scream was not just sound, it was the unraveling of identity, the tearing of a covenant older than his own life, reflection, and yet, in that chaos, a small kernel of clarity emerged. He understood something that no ritual, no catechism, no trial could have taught him. The machine god does not nurture weakness. It does not forgive rebellion. Not even when rebellion comes from the body it has itself constructed. To be rejected was to exist in the purgatory of self. To survive was to accept a fate without guidance, without sanctuary, without hope. And in this understanding, the first seeds of defiance took root. He would endure, not for the machine god, not for Mars, not for faith, but because he still remembered himself. And so the path of exile began. For Loran, the trial of flesh was only the first betrayal. The Fabricator Council would soon declare his heresy, severing every remaining tie to the forge world he had called home, and marking him as the excommunicated cog, a living testament to the price of failure. Chapter 4. The Excommunicated Cog. The council chamber was a cathedral of steel, its vaulted ceilings lined with conduits that hummed with sacred energy. Statues of the Omnissiah and long-dead magi watched from alcoves, their metallic visages unyielding and cold. Here every sound carried weight, every motion a verdict, every breath a judgment. Loran's footsteps echoed, as if announcing his transgression before any words were spoken. He had already been abandoned by the machine god, But the Fabricator Council's judgment was a ritual that made that cosmic rejection tangible, immediate, and unbearable. Each member, clad in robes of copper and iron, eyes glowing with mechanized intensity, regarded him as if he were an anomaly, an error in a system too sacred to tolerate deviation. Their mechadendrites writhed in anticipation, ready to extract confession, calibration, or confession through pain. The trial begins. Loran of the third cohort. The High Fabricator's voice rolled through the chamber, amplified by servos and vox. Every word was precise, measured, yet suffused with a weight of doctrine. You stand accused of spiritual contagion, heretical divergence, and the corruption of the flesh. Speak, if you can. But Loran had no words. Not because he could not speak, but because words themselves had been rendered meaningless. What had been demanded of him, perfection, obedience, sanctity, had been denied. The machine god had refused to acknowledge him, and now his peers mirrored that refusal. He knelt before them, not in submission, but in recognition of the inevitable. The flesh twitched beneath augmetics, a final, subtle betrayal. The council whispered among themselves, the hiss of hydraulics punctuating their deliberations. Clanged in synchronized ritual, writing verdicts in the air with sparks and holy inscriptions. The sentence was inevitable. Severance from the noosphere. One by one, his links to the noosphere were severed. Thought conduits, once humming with communion, went silent. Data spirits that had resided in his neural mesh were forcibly withdrawn, cataloged, and either destroyed or reassigned. Each disconnection felt like a limb being amputated. Each severed link a betrayal of memory and devotion. The machine gods. Silence had been abstract, theoretical, cruel. The Fabricator Council made it tangible, mechanical, ceremonial. Loran was no longer a priest, no longer a cog in the vast machinery of faith. He was an anomaly, a heretic, a living failure. And in the utter absence of connection, he experienced the coldest revelation of all. The machine had no need for him, the flesh had no claim to him, and the world he had devoted his life to would not remember him except as a cautionary tale. Ritual humiliation. The council did not only condemn, it performed a ritual that stripped Loran of identity. Names and titles were revoked in solemn incantation. Symbols of office were ripped away. His robe's circuitry unstitched. The marks burned off his skin with acid-laced flames. And the cranial cogitator interface, the most sacred of his augmetics, was deactivated in a slow ceremonial sequence. Every act was punctuated with chanting. The metallic hymn of condemnation echoed, layered with the sibilant hissing of cooling hydraulics, the grinding of gears, and the distant chorus of servo-priest's lamentation. He could feel the council's gaze in every nanometer of his being, and it was relentless. Every failure, every flaw, every suppressed hesitation was catalogued, measured, and amplified. He did not flinch. He could not. Cast out when the ritual concluded, Loran was no longer a servant of the Omnissiah. He was a datum erased, a cog removed, a priest excommunicated. The doors of the council chamber opened onto a world that had become alien. He walked into the Manufactoria corridors for the last time. Every familiar sight transformed into a reminder of exile. The apprentices and acolytes who had once looked up to him now avoided his gaze. The servo arms and machinery that had served him, guided him, protected him, moved aside as if sensing the anomaly that had passed. Loran was a heresy in motion, a flesh-bound priest without communion, a ghost among the faithful. And yet, he survived. The crushing isolation outside the council. Mars did not weep. The forges did not mourn. The machines did not pause to recognize him. Only the silence remained, thick, suffocating, and absolute. His existence became an act of defiance, merely by continuing to breathe, to think, to endure. The rejection of the machine god. compounded by the excommunication of the council, created a void around him. Every step was lonely. Every interaction carried the weight of judgment. Even simple tasks, repairing a cogitator, calibrating a servitor, interfacing with a forge link, became impossible. The machinery recoiled, sputtered, fell silent. He had become a harbinger of failure, a living warning to others. Reflection, and in that solitude, Loran confronted the truth of his existence. He was no longer bound by faith, ritual, or doctrine. He was a relic of what the Omnissiah demanded, a reminder that perfection was not a gift, but a standard one he could never meet. His flesh, once subordinate to the machine, was now his only companion. His mind, once synchronized with a greater purpose, was now a landscape of fractured thoughts. Excommunication was more than punishment. It was liberation from the illusion of acceptance, and at the same time, it was an eternal sentence. He was cast into a universe that neither recognized him nor welcomed him, a vessel of memory and flesh, adrift in a sea of steel and fire. The excommunicated cog had no home, and so, adrift and abandoned, Loran stepped into the wider Imperium. The universe itself seemed to sense his fracture. Starships stalled at his approach. Cogitators froze in reverent fear. Even the machinery of hive manufactoria whispered in silence. He had become the spiritless path, a living myth, a warning, and a curse. Chapter V. The spiritless path. The universe outside Mars was indifferent. Stars burned cold in the void, and the light of distant suns cast long alien shadows across drifting starships and abandoned manufactoria. Loran wandered a solitary figure in corridors and scrapyards where the hum of machinery should have welcomed him. Yet, wherever he went, engines sputtered, cogitatos froze, and the subtle pulse of the machine spirit faltered. The air itself seemed reluctant to carry his presence. He became a ghost among the faithful. A shadow in a galaxy built upon devotion to metal and mind. The once comforting rhythm of the machine had turned against him. Servitors jerked to a halt at his touch. Forge link nodes died when he approached. He reached for control panels, and the screens darkened. Even the simplest cogitator commands returned gibberish, as though the universe itself repudiated him. The spiritless path was not merely exile. It was annihilation of communion. Loran felt every step as a punishment, every breath as a reminder that the Omnissiah's absence was absolute. He had become an anomaly, an unrecognized variable in the equations of Mars, the Imperium, and the wider cosmos. Pilgrimage through industrial hellscapes, he moved from one hive manufactorum to another, each larger and more labyrinthine than the last, seeking only the faint whisper of recognition, the pulse of a machine spirit that might respond. Rusting conduits crawled across ceilings like veins, while molten slag dripped into pits of smoldering metal. Steam hissed like serpents, and furnaces roared like the mouths of demons. Yet no matter how closely he approached, no cogitator whirred in acknowledgement, no servitor hummed its recognition. Here. Amid these industrial hellscapes, Loran realized that he was a living paradox. Flesh that remembered, mind that calculated, but spirit that had been rejected. The pathways of the machines around him were silent, as if the very logic of the universe refused to compute his existence. He reached for familiar rituals, litanies of service and communion, but the words fell flat, meaningless against the unyielding silence. Each failed interaction compounded the alienation. Even automated defenses misfired in confusion, weapons systems idled, and maintenance drones fled his presence. The machines recoiled as if aware that the priest among them had no claim to sanctity, no right to command, no bond to honor. Days and nights blurred. The stars offered no guidance. The manufactoria offered no comfort. Time became a meaningless loop of failure and repetition. The silence pressed against him like a tidal wave, and Loran felt his mind begin to erode. Thoughts tangled, memories overlapped, and the boundaries between flesh and machine grew unstable. Asterisk visions haunted him, the hum of a servitor crying in void, a cogitator weeping sparks, and his own reflection in molten metal, eyes flickering with terror and recognition. He whispered prayers into empty halls, chants that once summoned communion, now only rebounded as echoes of his despair. Asterisk, he became a myth in the shadows, the spiritless path. Pilgrims whispered of him in dark manufactoria corridors, stories of the priest who could not speak to machines, who walked among cogitators and found silence, who carried the weight of the machine god's denial with each step. Asterisk, even the lowest, most corrupted of tech priests gave him wide berth. Some said he was a warning, others said he was cursed. The truth was simpler. He was proof that faith, flesh, and machine could fracture beyond repair. Asterisk, the loneliness was absolute. No apprentice dared approach. No machine dared obey. Even the most corrupted servitors hesitated, caught in some instinctual recognition that the Omnissiah's rejected child walked among them. He tried to forge companionship in circuits and steel, attempting to reconnect to the universal consciousness of the machine god. But every attempt ended in failure, every communion a reminder of absence. Asterisk, and yet, he endured. Not with faith, for faith had been denied. Not with hope, for hope had no place here. He endured because there was nothing else left to do. Step after step, corridor after corridor, starship after starship, the spiritless path was a pilgrimage through the unforgiving machinery of the universe, a journey without reward, a trial without purpose. Asterisk, it was here, in this endless wandering, that Laran confronted a new understanding. The machine god did not hate him, nor did it judge him for failure. Its silence was not cruelty, but indifference. The universe, for all its design and order, did not account for anomalies. Laran's suffering was neither punishment nor reward. It was a consequence of existence, a fracture in the pattern of faith and flesh, and in that quiet horror, he found a grim clarity. Survival was no longer about communion, ritual, or perfection. It was about endurance. It was about walking a path that no god, no machine, no human could recognize, and continuing, step by step. Despite the void of acknowledgement, asterisk, the spiritless path stretched before him, infinite and unyielding, and he would walk it, not for the machine god, not for Mars, not for faith, but simply because he still existed. Asterisk, but even endurance has limits. The flesh that had betrayed him, the faith that had abandoned him, and the universe that refused him, all would soon lead him to darker doors. In his desperation, Laran would seek the forbidden, the heretic, the unholy, and yet, even among the dark Mechanicum, he would find that rejection knows no bounds. Chapter 6. The heretic without a home. The darkness of the void outside the Imperium offered no solace, only an invitation. Laran's pilgrimage along the spiritless path had led him into forbidden sectors, abandoned forges, and the hidden veins of the galaxy, where the machine god's light dared not reach. Here, whispers of the dark Mechanicum festered, tales of heretic priests who had traded faith for power, who had bound flesh and machine to chaos itself. Asterisk, Laran's hope, fragile and desperate, was that these exiles, these denizens of corruption, might recognize in him a kindred soul. That if the Omnissiah had denied him, perhaps the ruinous powers of the dark Mechanicum would accept what the faithful had rejected. Asterisk, he crossed thresholds that even the most heretical tech priests dared not approach openly, doors scorched by demon fire, halls where cogitators pulsed with unnatural life, conduits writhing like serpents beneath blackened floors. The air reeked of ozone, sulfur, and synthetic decay. Machines whispered in tongues twisted by the warp, offering no comfort, only promise, a promise of power, belonging, and communion beyond the pale of holy doctrine. Asterisk, Yet even here, Laran was denied. The entities he sought, the dark Mechanicum, the demon engines, the techno-occult hierophants, recoiled. They recognized him as a priest without a master, a machine without a spirit, a soul unclaimed by any deity. Demons of the machine shrieked in mockery, their forms writhing across conduits and data streams. He attempted communion through the corrupted rituals. Litanies of power twisted by centuries of heresy, but the words faltered, fragmented by the absence of allegiance. The warp itself rejected his presence, a subtle tremor of denial that ran through every demon engine, every haunted forge world, every mechanized idol. Even the corrupt welcomed only those who bore devotion to a cause. Chaos, Nurgle, Tzeen, Slanesh. Laran bore only rejection. He was too faithful to the machine god to serve chaos fully, yet too broken to return to the Imperium. His soul was a paradox that even the warp could not claim. He wandered deeper into the bowels of hidden forge cults, places where time and reason had no dominion. Demon engines, half living, half dead, towered over him, their eyes molten pools of malevolence. Cultists practiced rites that twisted metal into grotesque mockeries of life, bending flesh and circuitry together in abominable symphonies of pain. Laran observed, desperate for a fragment of recognition, for a spark of acceptance. Yet each encounter reinforced his isolation. The cultists glanced at him with suspicion, machines shivered at his touch, and the very fabric of the warp seemed to hiss his presence away. He learned quickly. Here, there was no redemption. Here, there was only the grotesque mirror of the universe, power without guidance, knowledge without faith, machinery without God. And Laran, unclaimed by either light or darkness, belonged nowhere. Time blurred. Days and nights were meaningless as he traversed labyrinthine factories, forgotten asteroid forges, and warp-tainted data vaults. The silence that had once defined his exile now echoed with cacophonies of chaos. Demons, screaming metal, visions of impossible machinery fused with screaming flesh. Desperation became a constant companion. He tried to bargain with the heretic hierophants, attempted communion with demon engines, even offered his remaining augmetics as tribute. Nothing worked. Every approach ended in derision, every ritual failed. The universe itself seemed to conspire, denying him recognition, punishing him for seeking what was forbidden. And in this abyss, Laran realized the ultimate truth. Rejection knows no bounds. It is impartial, absolute, and eternal. The machine God had rejected him. The dark Mechanicum had rejected him. The warp itself could not accommodate his fractured existence. It was here, in the deepest pit of despair, that Laran's mind settled into a strange clarity. He was neither blessed nor damned, neither chosen nor forsaken. He had become a phenomenon outside the duality of loyalty and heresy. The universe had no claim to him, no covenant, no expectation. He was free, yet freedom without belonging is agony. And in that agonized freedom, he understood that some souls are too fractured for faith, too complex for the machines, too human to be machine, too mechanical to be human. He had become something else entirely, a wandering enigma, a heretic without a home, a soul denied both God and chaos. And yet, even in this final rejection, a faint light of reflection remained. Laran sought neither revenge nor power. He sought only understanding. In the derelict forges of the forgotten, he would attempt one last communion, not with God, not with chaos, but with the silence itself. And in that silence, he would confront the truth of his existence. Some souls are not cursed, not damned, not forsaken, they are simply forgotten. The machine gods, forgotten child. At last, Laran found himself in the ruins of a forge temple, abandoned centuries before, where the conduits still pulsed faintly. and the air smelled of scorched oil and sacred dust. The Omnissiah's presence had long since departed, leaving only echoes of worship, inscriptions worn smooth, and the cold hum of machinery untouched by life. Here, he would attempt one final communion. He knelt before a corroded altar, cranial augmetics humming weakly as he extended thought into the empty circuits, hoping for a spark, a sign, a whisper, a pulse. He recited the litanies of awakening and integration, the prayers taught in the sanctuaries of Mars, the rites memorized in a lifetime of service. But the responses that once came as warmth, guidance, and unity were absent. Silence, absolute, unbroken, cosmic silence. Loran's hands, flesh and machine intertwined, rested upon the altar. The machinery shivered faintly beneath his touch, but it offered no voice, no acknowledgement, no absolution. Only the cold, eternal indifference of the universe, a void more profound than the rejection of any counsel, more punishing than any warp-born mockery. He did not rage, he did not scream. There was no energy left for rebellion, no hope left for acceptance. The years of exile, the betrayal of flesh, the rejection by counsel and chaos, all condensed into one singular truth. Some souls are beyond communion, beyond guidance, beyond recognition. And yet, in this realization, a fragile serenity emerged. Loran understood that the machine god was neither cruel nor capricious. It was indifferent. Its silence was not punishment. Its absence was simply truth. The universe did not bend for individual suffering, nor did it reward mere devotion. It continued, vast, relentless, and unfeeling. In the ruins of the temple. Amid shattered augmetics and corroded circuits, Loran found clarity. He was not cursed, not damned, not forsaken in the conventional sense. He had been forgotten. With no expectation, no prayer for mercy, Loran extended his consciousness into the silent lattice of the temple. He did not ask for acceptance. He did not ask for power. He asked only to be seen, in the small way a single being might reach across the gulf of divinity and matter. The machinery offered no answer. Yet, in the cold hum and static resonance, he felt an echo, not of God, not of chaos, but of himself. His mind merged, briefly and silently, with the circuits, the dust, the metal, and the ghosts of worshippers long gone. For the first time, he understood. Purpose need not be granted by a god or a council. It could be claimed in the act of endurance, in the acknowledgement of one's own existence, however small or unnoticed. He had survived. He had walked the spiritless path. He had endured the excommunication, the flesh's rebellion, the heretic's rejection. And now, in quiet isolation, he was whole in his own fractured way. The haunting message, some souls are not consumed by chaos. Some are not saved by the machine god. Some are not remembered, revered, or feared. They simply exist. Loran rose from the altar, flesh and machine intertwined, augmented yet rebellious, broken yet enduring. The ruins were silent, the circuits cold, and the stars beyond the temple glimmered indifferently. And in that silence, he understood the weight and beauty of insignificance, the tragic, solemn truth of the forgotten. He stepped forward, into the void, carrying the quiet legacy of those who serve without witness, who endure without reward, and who are never seen except by themselves. The machine god's forgotten child walked onward, a myth, a warning, a testament to the cost of devotion, and the harsh mercy of a universe that acknowledges no one. And so the story ends. Not with redemption, not with damnation, but with remembrance of what it means to endure in a galaxy that forgets all but the relentless march of metal and fire. In the far future, there is only silence, and those who must walk within it.